Imagine waking up tomorrow in a world where India never existed. Just picture it for a moment. No yoga shaping the way millions breathe and heal. No Ayurveda guiding people toward natural wellness. No Bollywood lighting up screens across the world. No concept of zero that helped build modern science and technology. No Taj Mahal standing as a symbol of eternal love. No Gandhi inspiring freedom movements across continents. No spices that changed global trade. No festivals bursting with color, unity, and celebration. A world without India would feel strangely incomplete, like a story with chapters missing, like humanity forgot one of its most important ingredients. And that's exactly why today we're taking a journey not just through history, but through time itself, from the very beginnings of civilization on the subcontinent all the way to the India we know today. A rising global leader in culture, technology, science, health, and spirituality. This isn't just a story, it's a living timeline that continues to evolve every single day. And the more you hear it, the more you'll understand why India's history is actually the world's history, and why its influence has traveled far beyond borders, oceans, and centuries. So sit back, relax, and let's travel from start, all the way to now. From the very beginning of India's history, what makes this land truly extraordinary is not just its age, but its ability to evolve, absorb, influence, and reinvent itself while keeping its deepest roots alive. And when you travel back to those first traces of human presence, you realize that India's story doesn't start with kingdoms or empires, but with early humans carving out an existence on a land shaped by rivers, monsoons, mountains, and vast plains. Over 70,000 years ago, some of the earliest migrations of Homo sapiens passed through the Indian subcontinent, settling along rich landscapes that offered water, food, and shelter. And these early communities left behind tools, rock carvings, cave shelters, and signs of a growing human curiosity. From the Bhimbetka rock shelters to prehistoric tools found across the country, the earliest chapter of India was written not in words but in stone, showing us that this land has been a center of human life far longer than most people imagine. As thousands of years passed, these small communities transformed into organized settlements that eventually gave rise to one of the world's earliest and most advanced civilizations, the Indus Valley Civilization. Around 3300 BC, long before the pyramids of Egypt had reached their full glory, the people of the Indus Valley were building well-planned cities with drainage systems more advanced than many towns thousands of years later. Cities like Harappa, Mohenjo-Daro, Dolavera, and Lothal reveal a society that valued cleanliness, order, engineering, and international trade. Their homes had private wells, their streets were laid out in grids, and their craftsmen produced beads, pottery, and tools that reached distant regions through trade networks stretching to Mesopotamia. These early urban planners created granaries, dockyards, public baths, and intricate sewage systems, proving that the people of this civilization were not just surviving. They were thinking, innovating, and organizing life with remarkable intelligence. What makes this era even more mysterious is that their script remains undeciphered, leaving us with countless seals, symbols, and inscriptions that hint at beliefs, governance, and cultural practices we can only interpret through clues. The Indus Valley Civilization stands as the first great chapter in the story of India as a cradle of innovation. But like all ancient societies, it faced shifts in climate, changes in rivers, and other pressures that slowly led to its decline around 1500 BCE. Yet even in its decline, it planted seeds that influenced what would come next. As the Indus cities faded, new groups and cultures began shaping the next phase of India's history, including the arrival and integration of Indo-Aryan tribes who brought with them a new language base, early Sanskrit, and oral traditions that would eventually evolve into the Vedas, some of the oldest religious and philosophical texts in the world still in use today. This era transformed India into a land of thinkers, poets, spiritual seekers, and early scientists exploring everything from astronomy to mathematics. The Vedic age wasn't only about rituals. It produced deep reflections on life, nature, consciousness, and the universe. Village societies grew, agriculture expanded, social structures evolved. Kingdoms formed and dissolved, and India began shaping a cultural identity built on layers of wisdom, debate, and storytelling. This age also laid the foundation for major philosophical traditions such as Hinduism, but it didn't grow in isolation. It was a time of constant interchange, migration, and fusion, with beliefs adapting and absorbing new elements. Then came the era when kingdoms expanded into republics, trade grew across long distances, and powerful leaders emerged who shaped the culture and geography of the region. Among these early formations were the Mahajanapadas, 16 great states that competed, collaborated, traded, and shaped political life across northern India. Their rise set the stage for what would soon become one of the most transformative periods in Indian history. Amid these changing kingdoms, a powerful cultural and spiritual shift occurred with the birth of two major world religions, Buddhism and Jainism. Gautama Buddha, born as a prince but transformed into a philosopher, traveled across northern India teaching compassion, mindfulness, and liberation from suffering, attracting followers from all walks of life. His message spread through monasteries, travelers, merchants, and royal patrons, eventually reaching countries across Asia. Jainism, led by Mahavira, promoted non-violence, self-discipline, and respect for all living beings, influencing India's ethical and cultural framework for centuries. These religions were not separate from society. They shaped politics, trade routes, art, architecture, and education. Following this period of intellectual and spiritual richness came the rise of the Mauryan Empire, the first great empire to unify most of the Indian subcontinent. Chandragupta Maurya, guided by the strategist Chanakya, built a powerful centralized state with intricate administration, taxation, and diplomacy. His empire stretched across vast territories and set the foundation for political unity. But it was his grandson, Emperor Ashoka, who left one of the most enduring marks on India's cultural story. After witnessing the horrors of war, Ashoka embraced Buddhism and turned his reign toward peace, welfare, and moral governance, promoting values like justice, compassion, and ethical living. He built roads, planted trees, established hospitals, and carved edicts into stone pillars that still stand today as some of the oldest preserved writings in India. Through Ashoka, India's philosophical influence spread far beyond its borders, becoming a guiding light throughout Asia. After the Mauryan era came centuries of cultural flowering under various dynasties across the north, south, east, and west, each contributing something unique. However, one of the golden ages emerged with the Gupta Empire, often called the classical age of India. Mathematics, science, astronomy, literature, and art reached extraordinary heights. The concept of zero, decimal system, advanced surgical techniques, detailed astronomical observations, and epic poetry all flourished. India became a global center of knowledge, attracting scholars and travelers. Parallel to this, great kingdoms in southern India such as the Cholas, Cholas, and Pandyas built thriving maritime networks that connected India to Southeast Asia, fostering cultural exchange, trade, and architecture that eventually shaped entire regions. Across these centuries, India was not a single static entity, but a dynamic mosaic of cultures, kingdoms, languages, religions, and innovations. Each era absorbed what came before, built upon it, reshaped it, and carried it forward, making India's early to classical history not just a timeline of events, but a living evolution of ideas, inventions, and interactions that continue to define the identity of a civilization stretching thousands of years into the past and still pulsing through its present when India entered the era of great empires and rising kingdoms. The subcontinent transformed into a land where power, ambition, culture, and innovation collided in ways that shaped the world far beyond its borders. And this period truly shows how India didn't simply develop but expanded, connected, and influenced civilizations across continents. After the early foundations of Vedic society, republics, and the spread of new philosophies, India began to see massive political consolidation, wealth accumulation, international trade growth, and large-scale cultural expression, turning it into a thriving center of global exchange. One of the earliest examples of this powerful rise was the Mauryan Empire, with Chandragupta Maurya unifying vast territories through strategy, diplomacy, and military strength, creating a centralized political structure that allowed art, agriculture, education, and trade to flourish on an unprecedented scale. But the real transformation came through Ashoka, whose rule changed not only the empire but the very direction of Indian civilization by shifting focus from conquest to compassion. After witnessing the suffering caused by war, Ashoka renounced aggression and embraced a moral leadership rooted in Buddhism, spreading messages of peace, tolerance, and welfare through edicts carved into rock and stone pillars. These inscriptions, still standing today, reflect a ruler who believed that true power came from guiding society toward harmony rather than fear. Under his influence, roads expanded, universities were supported, trade routes grew, and ideas traveled far, reaching Central Asia, Sri Lanka, China, and Southeast Asia, showing how India became a global center of spiritual exchange and learning long before modern borders existed. After the decline of the Mauryas, India did not collapse but diversified into numerous regional kingdoms that competed, collaborated, and created unique cultural identities. This era of powerful states formed a landscape where the north, south, east, and west each developed distinct traditions while still remaining connected through trade, religion, and migration. The rise of the Kushans in the northwest brought a fusion of Greek, Persian, Central Asian, and Indian influences that shaped art, architecture, and commerce. Under Kanishka, the empire became a major supporter of Buddhism, helping spread it across the Silk Road into China and beyond. This era witnessed the flourishing of Gandhara art, where Indian themes were expressed with Greco-Roman techniques, demonstrating how open India was to absorbing and transforming external influences. Meanwhile, in central and northern India, the Gupta Empire emerged and created what many call the golden age of ancient Indian civilization. This era saw extraordinary progress in mathematics, astronomy, Ayurveda, literature, philosophy, and sculpture. It was during this time that Aryabhatta wrote groundbreaking works on planetary motion and the concept of zero. Kalidasa composed poetic masterpieces, and scholars produced texts that shaped medical and scientific understanding for centuries. The Gupta period was not just wealthy in gold and trade but rich in intellectual creativity, laying foundations that influenced civilizations around the world. Gupta coins, inscriptions, temples, and manuscripts show a society deeply invested in harmony, education, and cultural refinement. While the north thrived, the south was rising with equal brilliance through powerful kingdoms like the Cholas, Cheras, and Pandyas, who built vast maritime networks long before Europe imagined a global economy. The Chola Empire in particular developed one of the strongest naval forces in Asia, sending expeditions to Southeast Asia, establishing trade connections, and influencing art, temple architecture, and even local governance in regions like Indonesia and Malaysia. They built massive temples such as Brihadiswara Temple, which still stands as a marvel of engineering and creativity. With a sophisticated administrative system, flourishing ports, and deep cultural ambition, southern India became a bridge between East Africa, the Middle East, Southeast Asia, and China. This was a period when Indian spices, textiles, jewels, metalwork, and knowledge traveled through oceans and deserts, making India a major economic powerhouse whose wealth attracted traders from Rome, Arabia, Persia, and beyond. Indian mathematicians, astronomers, monks, merchants, sailors, and philosophers spread ideas and goods across continents, shaping global history in subtle but profound ways. Meanwhile, regional kingdoms across central and eastern India thrived in their own ways, producing unique architectural styles, classical music traditions, and local governance structures that gave the subcontinent its incredible diversity. The arrival of new waves of traders, explorers, and travelers highlighted India's importance in global networks. Greeks, Persians, Chinese monks, Arab traders, and Roman envoys described India as a land of immense wealth, fertile lands, advanced knowledge, and vibrant markets. India's ports were filled with ships carrying textiles, spices, ivory, pearls, metals, incense, and crafted goods to distant lands. Inland trade routes connected Himalayan regions with the Deccan Plateau and the southern coast, enabling constant movement of goods, ideas, and cultures. Buddhism and Hinduism spread along these routes, leaving artistic and architectural imprints across Asia. This interconnectedness made India not just a geographical region, but a vast cultural web that influenced art, sculpture, governance, mathematics, and spirituality in many countries. Yet India was also facing internal rivalries, conflicts, and shifts in power, which kept the political landscape dynamic and ever-evolving. New dynasties rose as others declined, each leaving behind temples, monuments, inscriptions, and cultural traditions that still shape Indian society. The rise of the Rajputs added another layer of valor, chivalry, warrior traditions, and regional identities across western and northern India. Their forts, palaces, and legends continue to define Indian heritage. Meanwhile, in the northeast, kingdoms like those in Assam developed their own unique blend of culture, agriculture, and craftsmanship, often interacting with Southeast Asian neighbors. Each region contributed a different flavor to India's evolving identity. By this time, India had become a vast mosaic of languages, religions, arts, and political systems, all coexisting within a shared cultural sphere. Its influence stretched across oceans and deserts, attracting travelers who wrote detailed accounts of its richness. Scholars such as Fahin and Xuanzang journeyed across India, describing cities filled with libraries, universities, monasteries, and vibrant markets. Their writings show a country deeply invested in learning, spiritual exploration, and community-oriented living. As centuries went by, India's internal dynamism and external connections made it one of the world's most important centers of civilization, shaping large parts of Asia through its ideas, philosophies, and cultural expressions. This was the era when India's global presence was not defined by conquest, but by influence, trade, and exchange, leaving behind a legacy of intellectual brilliance, artistic mastery, and interconnectedness that continue to grow through every generation that followed. When we look at the era of India's great empires, it becomes clear that this period didn't just shape Indian history, but influenced the world in ways that still echo today. It was a time when enormous kingdoms rose, powerful leaders changed the course of entire civilizations, and the subcontinent became a global hub for science, philosophy, trade, and cultural evolution. The Mauryas and Guptas were not just dynasties. They were engines of transformation that pushed India into a golden age of innovation and identity. When these empires expanded their reach, they connected people, ideas, and regions, creating a unified energy that allowed literature, medicine, mathematics, astronomy, spirituality, and art to flourish at a scale few civilizations had ever achieved. This era shows how India, at various points, was not simply participating in global progress but leading it. The Mauryan era began with Chandragupta Maurya, a leader who emerged from a time of political fragmentation and managed to unite much of the subcontinent through a mixture of military strategy, diplomatic skill, and the guidance of one of the most brilliant minds in Indian history, Chanakya. His work, the Arthashastra, became a foundational text for governance, economics, and statecraft, outlining complex ideas on taxation, administration, espionage, agriculture, justice, and foreign policy. It revealed a society that understood the importance of organization and long-term planning. Under Chandragupta's rule, cities expanded, trade routes strengthened, and systems of law became more structured, creating an atmosphere where people could thrive within a stable political environment. Merchants, farmers, scholars, and craftsmen gained greater opportunities to contribute to a growing economic engine that connected India's interior regions with the wider world. Yet it was Ashoka, Chandragupta's grandson, who propelled the Mauryan Empire to its most transformative moment. After the devastating Kalinga War, Ashoka experienced a profound internal shift. The brutality he saw forced him to rethink the meaning of power, and he chose to lead through empathy and moral responsibility rather than conquest. This personal evolution became a societal evolution. Ashoka began spreading messages of tolerance, welfare, justice, and compassion throughout the empire, carving these principles into rock edicts and monumental pillars so people across every region could understand them. These inscriptions encouraged religious harmony, environmental protection, animal welfare, ethical governance, and public health initiatives, revealing a deeply forward-thinking approach to leadership. Ashoka invested heavily in building rest houses, medical facilities, water systems, and infrastructure projects that improved daily life. He also played a major role in spreading Buddhism far beyond India's borders, sending monks and scholars to Sri Lanka, Central Asia, and Southeast Asia, which eventually helped Buddhism become one of the world's most influential spiritual traditions. His reign demonstrated that an empire's strength could come not only from military dominance, but from moral clarity and social well-being. After the Mauryas declined, the subcontinent didn't fall into stagnation, but transitioned into a vibrant era of regional powers. Over time, this led to the rise of the Gupta Empire, a period many historians call India's Golden Age because of its extraordinary achievements in science, literature, mathematics, art, and governance. Under rulers like Chandragupta I, Samudragupta, and Chandragupta Roman II, the empire expanded its influence through a mix of diplomacy, military skill, and strategic alliances. Their administration emphasized efficient taxation, wealth, structured provincial governance, and a flourishing economy built on agriculture, craftsmanship, and trade. Ports on both the eastern and western coasts sent ships filled with textiles, spices, metalwork, and precious stones to regions across Asia and the Mediterranean, bringing wealth and new cultural interactions into India. What made the Gupta era truly remarkable, however, was the intellectual explosion that occurred. This was the time when Aryabhatta wrote groundbreaking works on astronomy and mathematics, including ideas about the rotation of the Earth, the nature of eclipses, and sophisticated numerical calculations that would later influence scientific thought around the world. It was during this period that the concept of zero, which would become one of the greatest contributions to mathematics and global scientific progress, gained wider use and influence. Indian physicians and scholars made major advances in Ayurveda, performing surgical procedures, studying anatomy, and writing comprehensive medical texts that would remain relevant for centuries. Universities like Nalanda and Takshashila attracted students from China, Tibet, Korea, and Southeast Asia, creating international academic communities where ideas flowed freely across cultures. The Gupta period also produced some of the greatest literary works in Indian history. Kalidasa, often celebrated as one of the world's finest poets and dramatists, wrote masterpieces that captured emotion, nature, and human experience with remarkable elegance. His works revealed a society where art, philosophy, and imagination held high value. Sculpture, painting, and temple architecture evolved rapidly as artists began experimenting with new forms, materials, and expressions that reflected both devotion and creativity. Across the empire, temples were built with intricate carvings, balanced proportions, and symbolic motifs that shaped the future of Indian architectural design. These structures weren't just places of worship. They were cultural hubs where rituals, festivals, music, and dance brought communities together. This era also saw strong emphasis on social harmony and shared identity. Though regional variations existed, the empire maintained a cultural cohesion through language, trade networks, and shared artistic traditions. Sanskrit became widely used in literature and scholarship, creating a rich textual heritage that continues to influence Indian culture today. Music and dance evolved into more refined classical forms, and storytelling traditions like the Puranas helped preserve history, philosophy, and moral lessons in ways people could easily understand and pass on to future generations. Even after the decline of the Gupta Empire, the legacy of this golden age continued shaping India for centuries. The discoveries, stories, artistic styles, and scientific contributions from this time became the foundation upon which later civilizations built their own advancements. They influenced Islamic scholars, European mathematicians, Asian astronomers, and countless philosophical schools around the world. India had shown that intellectual growth, cultural expression, and political stability could create a society capable of extraordinary creativity and insight. The energy of the Mauryas and the brilliance of the Guptas contributed to an identity that was confident, dynamic, and intricately connected to global history. Through these centuries of powerful empires, the subcontinent learned the importance of unity, vision, education, innovation, and moral leadership. The people who lived during these times played roles, both small and large, that collectively shaped a civilization capable of producing groundbreaking ideas and enduring cultural achievements. The blending of political strength, spiritual exploration, scientific curiosity, and artistic mastery created a world where profound transformation was not just possible but natural. And the impact of this era still resonates strongly in India's identity today. When we move into the era of sultanates and empires that followed, India enters one of the most fascinating chapters of its story. A period where cultures didn't just meet but blended so deeply that entirely new identities, languages, architectural styles, foods, arts, and philosophies began to emerge. This was the time when the subcontinent saw waves of new rulers, traders, scholars, and artisans arrive from Central Asia, Persia, Arabia, and beyond. And instead of erasing what was already here, they added new layers, creating a rich mosaic unlike anything else in the world. The interaction between existing Indian traditions and the influences brought by these new powers created a cultural fusion that changed the character of the region forever. It was not merely a political transformation but a deeply artistic and intellectual one, and that is what made this era so important for India's evolution. The early Delhi Sultanate period marked the beginning of this fusion. As different dynasties rose, the Mamluks, Khiljis, Tughlaqs, Sayyids, and Lodis, the subcontinent began absorbing new administrative systems, political structures, architectural forms, and social exchanges. These rulers brought Persian culture, Central Asian tastes, new agricultural techniques, new art styles, and new forms of craftsmanship. Meanwhile, Indian art, music, spirituality, languages, and craftsmanship remained strong and continued evolving. As these influences mixed, entirely new traditions were born. Urdu, for example, emerged from the blending of Persian, Arabic, Turkish, and local Indian languages, evolving into a beautiful poetic expression that reflected the cultural dialogue happening across the region. Indian clothing, jewelry, and culinary styles began adopting Persian flavors, literally and figuratively, as spices, recipes, and techniques merged into something fresh. Even the way cities were designed started to shift, with domes, arches, geometric patterns, and intricate gardens adding to the traditional Indian aesthetic. As the sultanates grew, many regional powers across North and South India were also developing, each bringing their own artistry and ideas to the tapestry. The Deccan region, for instance, became a powerful center of fusion culture. The Bahmani Sultanate, and later the Deccan Sultanates, produced an extraordinary mix of Persian influences and local Dravidian traditions. Dakni language flourished in this period, blending southern and northern linguistic elements into something completely new. Art, music, and architecture in the Deccan took on a flavor that was neither fully Persian nor fully Indian, but a beautiful mixture that made the region stand out historically. Courts became centers where poetry, dance, craftsmanship, and philosophy thrived in an atmosphere of creativity and experimentation. But the most significant influence came with the rise of the Mughal Empire, which transformed this cultural blending into a refined, large-scale expression. When Babur established Mughal rule, he brought not only Central Asian traditions, but also a mindset that valued art, architecture, literature, and beauty. Each Mughal emperor contributed something unique to India's identity, making the empire not just a political power, but one of the greatest cultural forces in human history. Akbar, with his open mind and deep curiosity, embraced diversity in a way few rulers ever have. He encouraged dialogue among scholars of different religions, languages, and philosophies. His court became a place where Persian painters worked alongside Indian artists, producing the legendary Mughal miniature paintings that blended techniques from both traditions. He supported translations of major texts so wisdom could move freely between communities. His policies of tolerance and inclusion helped create an atmosphere of trust, creativity, and harmony, allowing people to express themselves without fear. Architecture reached breathtaking heights during the Mughal era. Indian stonework and carving traditions merged with Persian dome structures and Central Asian garden designs to create monuments that became world icons. The Taj Mahal, perhaps the most famous example, is a perfect representation of this cultural synthesis. It combines Indian craftsmanship, Persian aesthetics, Islamic geometry, and artistic symbolism in a way that speaks to the emotions of anyone who sees it. But the Taj Mahal is only one piece of a much larger story. Red Fort, Humayun's tomb, Fatehpur Sikri, Agra Fort, and countless mosques, palaces, and gardens built during this period reflect a civilization that valued elegance, symmetry, and meaning in design. These buildings weren't just architectural achievements. They were expressions of an era where cultures blended so seamlessly that something entirely new was born. Under Jahangir and Shah Jahan, art and aesthetics reached a level of refinement that shaped everything from clothing to painting to furniture. The Mughal school of painting reached extraordinary detail and sophistication, capturing nature, royal life, mythology, and daily interactions with a depth of emotion and realism that still amazes people today. Meanwhile, music was evolving too. The blending of Persian melodies with Indian ragas helped develop new musical forms that became the foundations of Hindustani classical music. Instruments were modified, new ones were created, and court musicians brought innovation after innovation as emperors supported their creativity. Even regional cultures flourished under this interconnected environment. In Rajasthan, Rajput kingdoms maintained their fierce independence while participating in cultural exchanges with the Mughals, resulting in new art styles, literature, and architecture. South India continued developing its own vibrant traditions, even as it absorbed external influences in textiles, jewelry, and temple design. Bengal became a powerful center of literature, trade, and craftsmanship, influenced by both Indian and foreign traditions. Kashmir evolved into a region known for weaving, carving, poetry, and music that blended Persian grace with local creativity. Everywhere you look, this era was bursting with artistic expression, intellectual exploration, and cultural blending. This period also saw massive growth in trade networks. India's textiles, especially cotton and silk, became prized across the world. Traders from Europe, the Middle East, and Asia flocked to Indian ports to buy spices, cloth, diamonds, pearls, metal goods, and exotic craft. Indian maritime power remained strong, and its land routes connected the subcontinent with Persia, Central Asia, China, Africa, and Europe. As goods moved, ideas moved with them. This constant flow of interaction helped India stay connected to global trends while shaping many of them. Society during this period was complex and layered. While there were conflicts, rivalries, and political struggles, there was also incredible cooperation among communities. Shared traditions emerged: festivals, cuisines, languages, clothing styles that blended elements from many cultures into forms that felt natural and local. The idea of India as a land of diversity gained new depth during this time because people, despite differences, were constantly influenced by each other's food, music, stories, and lifestyles. The result was a civilization that didn't simply tolerate differences, but embraced them in ways that created extraordinary artistic and cultural richness that continues to define India today as India moved into the era of colonial rule. The entire rhythm of the subcontinent changed in ways that were painful, disruptive, and deeply transformative. This was a period that tested the strength of Indian identity, pushing people to redefine what freedom meant and what kind of nation they wanted to build. When British power slowly expanded across India through trade, exploitation, diplomacy, and force, it didn't simply control land. It reshaped economies, social structures, and everyday life. Traditional industries collapsed under new policies, farmers were burdened with taxes that drained entire villages, and cultural institutions faced pressures that threatened centuries of heritage. But in the midst of all this, a powerful resistance began to grow, not from one place or one community, but from millions of voices across the subcontinent who realized that freedom wasn't something given, it was something claimed. This chapter of Indian history stands out not only for its struggle, but for the unity, courage, and determination that ordinary and extraordinary people showed as they fought for a future they could call their own. The first major uprising, the 1857 revolt, showed how deep the frustration had become. It was sparked by a small incident, but it exploded into a widespread rebellion across northern India because the anger had been building for decades. Soldiers, farmers, artisans, and leaders joined hands, standing up to a system that seemed impossible to defeat. Although the revolt ultimately failed, it awakened something powerful, the understanding that Indians could rise together. This was the beginning of a shift from regional resistance to a growing sense of national consciousness. Over time, people from different languages, religions, and regions began to see their struggles as connected, fueling a collective movement that would take decades to reach its full strength. The rise of the Indian National Congress in the late 19th century gave this shared identity a platform. At first, it was a group of intellectuals, lawyers, and reformers who wanted to persuade the British to give India more rights. But as time passed, the demands became bolder. Indians began calling not just for reforms but for full independence. Leaders like Bal Gangadhar Tilak ignited passion among the masses, declaring that freedom was their birthright. Writers, poets, and thinkers contributed to this awakening by reminding people of their history, their culture, and their strength. Newspapers and public gatherings became tools of resistance, spreading new ideas and inspiring millions who had never before considered that they were part of something much larger than themselves. When Gandhi entered the scene, the movement gained a completely new direction. He brought a philosophy that was both simple and revolutionary: fight injustice without violence. His belief in Nankau, operation, civil disobedience, truth and non-violence gave the freedom struggle a moral foundation that the world had never witnessed at such a massive scale. Gandhi traveled from village to village, listening to people, understanding their pain, and encouraging them to believe in their own power. He turned salt, cloth, and spinning wheels into symbols of resistance, proving that even the most ordinary actions could become acts of defiance when they came from unity and conviction. Millions followed his call, participating in marches, protests, boycotts, and movements that shook the British Empire. The Salt March became a global inspiration, showing how one man walking with purpose could influence an entire nation. Alongside Gandhi, countless other leaders shaped the struggle in their own ways. Jawaharlal Nehru articulated a vision of modern India centered on science, equality, and progress. Subhas Chandra Bose pushed for more aggressive action, gathering forces to fight for independence from outside India's borders. Bhagat Singh, Sukhdev, and Rajguru inspired a generation with their bravery, while Sarojini Naidu, Annie Besant, and countless women stepped into leadership roles that broke social barriers. Revolutionaries, reformers, peasants, students, and workers all became part of a vast movement that had no single face but shared a single dream. The freedom struggle wasn't only about defeating a foreign empire, it was about reclaiming dignity, identity, and hope for future generations. When independence finally came in 1947, it was both a triumph and a tragedy. The joy of freedom was overshadowed by the pain of partition, a division that tore apart families, communities, and hearts on both sides of the new borders. Yet even in this moment of turmoil, India began the challenging task of building a nation from the ground up. Under the leadership of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, the Constitution was drafted with a vision that reflected equality, justice, liberty, and rights for all citizens regardless of background. It became one of the world's most detailed and forward-thinking constitutions, balancing modern ideals with the unique diversity of Indian society. India entered its next phase committed to democracy, choosing the power of votes instead of violence to shape its future. In the decades that followed, India faced enormous challenges. Poverty, illiteracy, food shortages, and conflicts tested the nation repeatedly. But with each challenge, India responded with resilience. The Green Revolution transformed agriculture and prevented famine. Scientific institutions grew stronger, sending satellites into space and building a foundation for technological innovation. India's cultural influence continued to expand, with its films, cuisine, music, and literature reaching audiences around the world. The economic liberalization of the 1990s opened new opportunities, allowing industries, businesses, and technologies to grow at incredible speeds. The country moved from being seen as a struggling young nation to becoming a global player in IT, medicine, space research, trade, and education. Today, India stands as one of the largest democracies in the world, a country whose diversity remains its greatest strength. With over 1 billion people speaking hundreds of languages and practicing multiple faiths, India shows that unity does not require uniformity. Its rise in technology, wellness, science, startups, cinema, and culture reflects a spirit that has survived ancient civilizations, invasions, colonization, and partition. The modern era is driven by young entrepreneurs, scientists, athletes, artists, and thinkers who represent a confident, ambitious, and globally connected India. From ancient knowledge systems like yoga and Ayurveda becoming global trends to Indian scientists contributing to major breakthroughs, the country continues to influence the world in ways that echo its long, rich history. India's journey from colonization to independence and then to modern global presence is a story of resilience, adaptability, and courage. It shows how a civilization that has endured for thousands of years continues to reinvent itself without losing the essence that makes it unique, carrying forward the voices of those who fought for freedom into a future shaped by their dreams.